One hot and muggy summer afternoon, several years ago, while traveling in Rome, I slipped into a darkened museum at St. Peter's Basilica. Walking through those ornately carved doors, I was suddenly standing in front of one of the most famous sculptures of the world. The image is timeless, evoking a feeling of awe-inspiring stillness. It's the picture of holiness, and I stand with strangers viewing a holy image. I've stepped inside a private moment between a mother and her son. It's the Pieta, the pity, the Italian sculptor Michelangelo's vision of a mother's resignation of death. Mother Mary and her son Jesus in her arms. Taken down from the cross, Jesus' body is splayed across her lap, and pity is shown on the face of that Virgin Mother, holding the lifeless body of her beloved Son. Sorrow can only experience on the face of a mother that is asked to go through that. She holds her son in her arms, resigned to his premature death. She is the calm to the truth of his still form. She offers his physical body up to the salvation of the world. And in time, she understands that in his death, others may have life. On another hot and muggy afternoon a few summers ago, on the busy streets of West Grand Boulevard in Detroit, Michigan, where I was a chaplain, an ambulance pulls into the emergency room entrance of the largest hospital in Detroit. The temperature is 94 degrees and hot steam is radiating from the pavement. Children are shouting out on the streets and they're running through open fire hydrants. The adult neighbors are sitting in lawn chairs on their sidewalks, taking their meals out of doors, all in an effort to keep that heat at bay. Oppressive, hot heat, energy is rippling up and down the streets. There's no promise of the temperature easing up on that summer day in the city. Attendants meet the ambulance at the door and lift the stretcher out of the vehicle. And they race into the triage unit of an overcrowded downtown emergency room. Shouts are called out to the medical team and at the ready to work on the victim of an incoming GSW, gunshot wound to the head. Point blank, an act of violence. Hushed tones surround the victim, and uniformed police officers accompany the still body of this victim. The officer stands silently off to the side, outside the triage area, and they quietly whisper to one another. The officers stand there and they say to the intake personnel, he's an adult, male, Hispanic, single, no family, no friends, accompanying him in the ambulance. Brisk voices break out through the open-aired surgery door, and calls for assistance echo down those halls, and the resuscitation team rushes in and bends over the victim. They begin to work intently on his body. Silence as thick and ready and hoping for a break. Only murmurs of the medical team are called to bring him back to life are heard in the room. The ER notifies the pastoral care office, and I'm the chaplain on call that afternoon. I arrive a minute later, and I search for family members and friends in the hallway, and there are none. The patient is alone, and I stand in the side of the room as the doctors work on him. And I begin to pray for this man and for his broken body. I stand at the edge of the door waiting for anyone who may come in and be with him. I wait. I pray. No one comes. I wait. and I pray. This man is alone. The police officer and I stand silently together outside, attentive, discreet, and are waiting at a distance. The nurses tell me of the extent of this man's injuries. No brain activity. Gunshot wound to the head, they tell me. I ask the police officers if they know of the circumstances of this man's injuries, and they tell me that a gunshot wound was delivered point blank directly to him. A co-worker on a construction site walked up to him unprovoked and drew his gun. A victim of violence, and they don't know why. They have the co-worker detained in custody, and the co-worker was not Hispanic. The officers look somber and apprehensive. They wait in the hallway till the doctors are done working on him. Looks like a hate crime, they say to each other, with all those protests and marches on immigration, they say. His prognosis is not good, and brain waves can be detected on the monitor and then they fade. Technically, if no brain activity is found, death can be declared. Waiting in silence, the resuscitation team slows down and they begin to pack up their life-saving equipment and end their work. Their efforts could not save and claim back the life of this young man. Nurses now take over and settle the victim's body into a hospital bed for transfer to the intensive care unit. The police officers depart, making notes in their little black books, shaking their heads in sorrow and repressed anger. A floor nurse approaches with two people. They come up to me, a Spanish-speaking woman and an American man. Their faces are stunned with fear, and they identify themselves. The man is a supervisor at the construction site where the victim worked, and the woman is a friend of the victim. They're afraid and they are in shock, and I escort them to a private room, and I sit with them, and I learn about this man, the victim. They tell me that the victim's name is Jesus Garcia. He's from Mexico, and he's been working in the country for 7 years. No family is here with him. He sends all of his money to his mother and his family in Mexico. He's only 26 years old. He's an illegal alien, an undocumented worker, and his only dedication is to his family and to his work. He lived frugally with other Mexican immigrants. Keeping little for himself, he sent his earnings to his mother. And the woman is stunned and in tears, his friend. She's afraid for her friend's life and wants to inform his family in Mexico. They shake their heads and they cry softly, and they hold one another up as they walk away from that emergency room. 6 days later, I go back to the intensive care unit to conduct a prayer service in Spanish with a Catholic priest on duty. They have kept his body alive on life support until the victim's mother can get an emergency visa and come to Detroit to see her son. Her visa has been delayed, and it had been 7 years since she had last seen her son. She speaks no English. She has never been outside of her village or into even a large city in Mexico. And the priest and I stand there as sentinels beside her son's body. We silently watch her approach into the room, and we greet her with an embrace, and we begin to silently pray for her. The room's lights are down low. Silence surrounds this vigil. As the mother enters this room, 2 escorts are holding her upright, and they walk with her slowly and carefully, arms surrounding her, and she approaches the doorway of the ICU slowly. We continue to pray, and she enters the room. She begins to moan. Her knees buckle and her strong arms hold her up at her side, and she gasps, she cries, and she breaks free of their hold, and she lurches forward onto the bed, moaning. Lying across her son's still body, she weeps, cries muffled by the sterile bed sheets. A circle gathers in around the bed, and the worship service as Spanish prayers and liturgy begin. The Lord's Prayer is recited in a strong whisper, and tears come and arms embrace one another within that circle. Friends stand serving as sentinels. They stand and watch as this mother releases her sorrow and her pain. There is tension in the room as hospital personnel are hoping that the mother will grant permission for her son's body to be used for their transplant program. Jesus' body, Jesus's body, is strong and firm, full muscles formed, able to do the hard work of construction work, providing for his family. Yet now his body splayed out on that bed will provide no more money for this mother. There are no bruises or cuts on his massive body. Only his head is swathed in gauze, obscuring his face. How can such a strong body be so still? She asks in her native tongue. The hospital transplant team stands outside the door, waiting for the mother's signature to release his organs. That mother's small, wiry figure embraces her son, and she touches the large body on the bed. She begins to pat her son in a motherly gesture. She prays out loud in her local dialect. She walks to the edge of that bed, and she wraps her arms underneath her son's shoulders and head. And she stands upright and she talks softly to him, looking down into his bloody, bandaged face, softly speaking words of love that only a mother can say to a dying child. The mother is a picture of holiness. We're witnessing a private, holy moment in time. Her face shows such maternal sorrow that only she is called to experience. There is no other way for her to go but through this sorrow, so she continues on with her litany in Spanish. She holds on to his head and shoulders, reciting private prayers. She releases her moaning and keening and says quietly, Jesus, Jesus, mijito. Jesus, Jesus, my son. Whether in Rome or Baja, Mexico, or Detroit, Michigan, a modern-day Pieta is on display in front of me. I feel pity myself on the holy scene of this mother and child. There she is alone with her son in the midst of strangers. This mother in Detroit, alone in a foreign world, speaking no local language, communicates to all of us as we stand as sentinels guarding the private moment. She holds onto her son's lifeless form, and she too, like the Virgin Mary, is asked to surrender her son's life and body over to death and burial. However, something more is being asked of her in this modern day. She sees the transplant team outside in the hallway, and she knows what's being asked of her. She kisses her son's hands, tears falling on his rough calluses, and she silently whispers, "Adios, mijito," and walks from the room, upright with dignity. And then finally she chooses to give her son's body over to death so that others may find life. A timeless image of holiness. With a gesture of sacrificial love, this Mexican mother signs the permission form that will bring life to so many others, sons and daughters, in a world that she does not even know of. An image of holiness, indeed.